What level of research have you seen is like a baseline for pitching brands?
The sweet spot, in my opinion, is about 15 to 20 minutes of research, where you do this kind of sleuthing exercise where you look at their blog, you look at their press releases, you look at what they're posting on social media. This is one of my favorite strategies that I talk about is going to a brand's Instagram. If it's a consumer brand, pretty much every consumer brand has an Instagram, right? So for example, let's say, January, and we want to pitch a brand for a new year, new you campaign. Too late. Sorry. They baked that campaign 6 months ago. You have to know what types of campaigns they were running so that when you pitch them, let's say in August, that's when you need to be pitching them for a January kind of new year, new you campaign. And when you reach out to them, you say, hey, I saw that you were running that hashtag new year, new you. Are you going to be running that campaign again this year?
Welcome back to another episode of The Art of Online Business. You can see that Justin Moore is back, the creator wizard or the owner of the brand Creator Wizard. And he's here today to talk about his upcoming book, which I thought you, the listener, absolutely needed to hear about because it's called Sponsor Magnet and has everything and anything to do with getting sponsors so that you can fund your dream. Now, we're going to talk about that in a moment, but Justin and I have already recorded an episode, and that is also in the show notes below. And it was great. We learned about the highlights and some of the tougher periods as he's been growing his business. He's been in business as a creator, as an influencer agency owner, and as a course creator and a coach for the better part of 2 decades, 15 years actually. And he knows what he's doing. He is a sponsorship coach, and he's the founder of Creator Wizard, which is a school and a community that teaches you how to find and negotiate your dream brand deals so that you stop leaving thousands on the table. Along with his wife, April, he's been a full-time creator for 10 years, and he's personally made over $4 million working with brands. He's been in on these deals that have been up to $1 million. He's had brands talking to him about working with hundreds of creators. He's represented creators in his influencer marketing agency that he ran for 7 years. He brings a very unique perspective because not only has he been a creator in the trenches doing sponsorships for years, but after running an agency, he's also an insider who knows what's going on behind the scenes and how big brands choose folks to partnership like you and me and why they pass on others. And it's his mission to enable creators big and small to land 1 million paid brand partnerships by 2032. Justin Moore, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, hello. Let's go.
I know it's going to be good. And I do want to say, when you talk about what goes into getting a sponsorship deal, that is very real to me as I've had to navigate those talks with potential sponsors and they come at you with this term or that term, or they ask you something and you're just kind of like a deer in headlights. Like, what do I say? What do I do? And so I know you talk about that in the book. And I thought the first question I want to ask you is, for the course creator, coach, or membership owner listening right now, why do they need the information that's inside of your book, Sponsorship Magnet?
All right. So in Sponsor Magnet, I think the core of what you should really understand is that sponsorships are not just for social media influencers who are dancing on TikTok. I have my course, Brand Deal Wizard, sponsored. I have my course sponsored. Okay. So let me tell you exactly how this works. Okay. So what happened was that when I first started doing sponsorships for my Creator Wizard business, initially it was not even on my radar. I didn't even think like, oh yeah, I guess I have an audience of like, 35,000 creators. There's probably creator economy companies that would want to like get in front of that audience with their products. But that wasn't even on the radar when I started. But like they were saying, hey, we actually want to get in front of your course students because those people are the most valuable to us because they're spending thousands of dollars. They're investing in their business. That's like the best type of persona of the people that we want to be in front of. How can we get in front of them? And I was like, I don't know. I've never really done that before. And so essentially what I did is I created something called the Rising Creator Grant. So what this was is the way I described it is I went to the brand and I said, look, okay, if you purchase X amount of seats in my course, at the time it was a cohort-based course, then I will give your brand or your tool a shout out during a strategic segment during the course at whatever week it was relevant. I'll give you a bunch of love on social media. The creator gets in for free, right? And then now they're huge fans of the brand, and I get more course enrollments, right? And so, and if you purchased a certain number of seats, then hey, let's have your director of marketing or your director of product development come in and do a guest session during the course. And so this was this beautiful win-win-win structure for this sponsorship. And this is one of the biggest things that I preach in the book is this idea of creativity. When a sponsor approaches you and you may not have any more ad inventory for your podcast or your newsletter, or you've never really done sponsorships, that's not the point. The point is that you sit and you think, how can I help the brand accomplish their business objective while still accomplishing mine, and by making money in the process. So it's this mindset of creativity that runs as a core theme throughout the book.
I've never heard of a course being sponsored. Where'd you come up with that idea?
I imagined it. I created it. That's the point. Is like no one like this whole online business thing, man. We're all making things up. We have no idea. Like I've definitely had no idea what I was doing when I started. But it was like the most exciting things that have come to me throughout my life, or business decisions and things like that, was just when I sat down and I thought, like, what would be really cool? What would get the brand really excited? And sometimes it would work, and sometimes it wouldn't. And so, like, yes, of course, you could propose that to a brand and they may not be into it, but a lot of times they might. And so I think this is just really like a very, very important concept, is like you're only limited by your own creativity.
Okay, so sponsor me. Talk to me about this, because like what I'm seeing, the subheading here is how to attract, price, and execute your dream sponsorship, so you stop leaving thousands on the table. And my mind instantly asks the question, like, what are some of the things that cause, let's say, sponsorship amateurs like me, I'm in that category, to leave money on the table when it comes to working with a brand?
The number one most important thing is that you are not asking the brand about what a win would look like. What would success look like when you collaborate with them? If anyone has ever dabbled in sponsorships, the conventional wisdom is like, make a media kit, have a rate card, have some packages that a brand, or you go a place on your website where they can go and just like pick inventory on your podcast, or make it easy for them, right? You have a Stripe link, like this type of thing, right? Which is the worst advice in the world, because if you do not have a conversation with the sponsor, how do you know that they saw your podcast, they look, oh wow, the Art of Online Business is the absolute perfect podcast for our brand. They speak specifically to course creators and membership owners and community folks. Like, that is exactly who we need to be in front of. And guess what? There's not a ton of those podcasts out there, right? And so if you're their exact desired persona of the audience, of your audience, how do you know they wouldn't have been willing to spend a $50K to be your title sponsor for the entire year? Instead, the only option you gave them was to pick a couple of $200 podcast ad reads. I guess that's all he says that we can do, is there's no way to contact him, have a conversation. He doesn't want to get on a phone call with us, right? And so this step of like trying to minimize it and reduce the friction, and I guess I kind of get it, but like being willing to just get on a phone call and be like, hey, like, tell me about what's on your product roadmap, like what's important to you for 2025, like what is coming down the pipeline, like are you facing competitive headwinds? Are there competitors that you're trying to hold off? Like just tell me, ingest some information, and then once you have that information, you say, oh, okay, great, this is so useful to know. These are your objectives. Let me put together a bespoke proposal for you that will outline how I can help you accomplish those things by sponsoring me, right? So it's this kind of positioning exercise. So of course you should still, provide to them packages, and this is something we talk about in chapter 2, all around the negotiation section. So different packages and things like that. But it's a positioning exercise, right? Because you have to start with what is important to them, what are their objectives, so that they can understand if they're going to pay you 20 grand or 10 grand or even $1,000, they have to understand where that money is going for and how it is, can be pulled through to their objectives.
We said this in the previous episode, but if the listener hasn't heard that, they're probably also asking themselves right now, okay, how do you know all this stuff? How many brand deals have you done? Can you share that again with the listener? Because I was quite impressed.
Yeah, so my wife and I have personally done over 550 sponsorships. You name a consumer brand, we've probably done a partnership with them over the last 10, 15 years. But then I've done thousands through the agency that I ran. So I've seen all sorts of different types of creators, podcasters, influencers, authors, speakers. I've done event partnerships. I actually just signed on an event sponsor for my upcoming event, which is exciting. So it's like I've done every type of partnership under the sun that you can imagine. And so a lot of this wisdom is born from honestly making every mistake in the book. I got to share this anecdote because it's funny. Back in the day when we were doing one of our first kind of partnerships, a clothing brand reached out to my wife and said, "Hey, we would love to give you $2,000 in free clothing credit on our site." And she was like, "Awesome. Yes, let's go. Send through the code." Right. And so in return, they sent over this like agreement, and like idiots, because we were in our young 20s, we had no idea what we were doing, just didn't really even read it and just kind of signed it. Right. And so one day we are watching TV and a TV ad comes on with my wife's footage from her YouTube video, like her name and likeness, her talking about the brand. "Oh, I love it," like this type of thing. And we turned to each other, we're like, "Did we agree to let the brand run TV ads with this?" Sure enough, go back to the contract. There it is. We signed away broadcast TV rights. Not even, we didn't even get paid. It was just clothing credit, right? And so like a lot of these mistakes and stuff that I talk about in the book are come from those like awful mistakes that we made early on.
Whoa. You had to be, because you knew, you had, that wasn't your first brand deal, right?
It wasn't, but this was like, again, it was like every time we made a mistake, it was like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that again." Right. It was just like all you think you're learning, but then it's like, you don't know what you don't know. Right.
Yeah. You don't know what you could have gotten to have rights to a commercial that's going on. Primetime TV will just say, "All right, so break it down then," because having this conversation rather than just, making a brand settle for one of your packages, but having this conversation with a brand to understand their needs and then creating like a bespoke package for them, so to speak, sounds good. But how do you get out of the email inbox and onto the phone to have this kind of conversation? Can you share something about that? Because that sounds difficult to me.
Yeah, so I want to be clear. Like, you can absolutely still ask these questions over email. If you're listening to this petrified of being like, "I can't get on a phone call with a brand. What if they ask me something and I don't know the answer?" So I get it. I understand and I empathize with that. So you could still ask simple questions like, "What would success look like, for you as part of this partnership?" Some of these, a lot of the things I talk about in the book are like these scoping questions. It's like, okay, what exactly do you want to do? What types of platforms do you want to activate on? How many assets do you want to generate? We talk about things like usage rights. So do you want to use the content that I'm going to generate and use it in other ways, like paid advertising on TV, this type of thing? Or do you want to run paid media with it and your expertise on Facebook or Meta or whatever? Exclusivity, right? Is the brand saying, "Hey, you can't work with any of our competitors for a certain duration?" Those are all things that you should be factoring into your pricing when you put a proposal like that together. So you can absolutely start scoping the deal out over email, but I have just found that the call is the best case scenario, because you can establish that initial rapport. Because you have to remember, when you're initially engaging with a sponsor, the chances that they're just reaching out to you is super low. They've probably reached out to 10, 20, 30, 50 other people, right? And so you are still, this is a big mistake a lot of people make, is they think they can kind of phone it in when the brand reaches out. "Oh, I'm hot stuff. They want me. They emailed me." No, you still have to pitch them on why you're the best person for the job, right? And so getting on the phone and saying like, being very excited and enthusiastic and asking thoughtful questions, like that is going to go a far way, especially when it comes down to decision time and they've got, 30 people's pricing in front of them. And even if you are charging 2 to 3x what some of these other people are, they're like, "You know what? Even though Justin's more expensive, I feel like we should just go with him because it's probably going to go better." Like, I made those decisions all the time when I ran the agency, that I would pick someone who was more expensive because they were more prompt, and this campaign had a quick turnaround, and I just could not risk anything being late, right? And so it's a lot of these insights that I talk about in the book, is like there's these intangibles, that it's not just about your numbers. A lot of people think like, I'm not going to work with sponsors until I get this amount of listeners on my podcast or this amount of people on social media. Or it's like this arbitrary threshold that they think they need to exceed before they can ever work with brands. And that is not, that's a total myth, right? And so I think that that's like another really big important factor is just realize that like you can actually reach out to brands yourself. You don't have to wait for them to reach out to you.
Novel idea. Huh. And so it sounds like a lot of the questions that you're saying ask help you begin to understand the kind of interest that the brand has and their needs, but then it sounds like it also makes you come across as you know what you're talking about. Uh, Build credit for you in the brand's eyes.
100%, because like, what's the alternative is they reach out and they ask, they say, oh, I'd love to collaborate with you. And the creator's response is basically very narcissistic. It's like, this is how much I charge. This is how many views I get. This is how blah, 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 blah. And it's like very me. And it's kind of off-putting, right? Where contrast with your scenario where it's like them. It's like, how can I help you? What are your objectives? And of course, you need to balance that with your authenticity and in your integrity with your audience and that connection. Of course, it's a balancing act. But like, it's a very, and you could of course still talk about yourself, but that's later, right? Talk about them first. And just, again, what's in it for them? It's this age-old business principle, right? Is like, what is in it for them? How can you help them win? And realize that paying you, because here's the other really critical insight, dude. And something I talk about in the book is that, a lot of people have been burned when they tried to pitch a brand early on. They reached out and they said, hey, I've got this awesome podcast or this awesome community or this other whatever, all these people in it. It's be a perfect fit for your customers, your audience, sponsor me. This is kind of what the pitch does. And the brand says, no, thanks, not interested, or they ghost them. And then people say, pitching doesn't work, which is total BS. If you were on the receiving end of this message and you're some random nobody, not trying to insult anyone, emailed you and tried to like, say me, look at me, I'm awesome. What are you going to do? You're going to delete it or not respond. That's just the reality. Right. And so, and people think like, brands have all these like millions of dollars lying around, these big pools of cash that they could just pay random people who reach out to them. No, you know what they have money for? They have money for their own initiatives. This goes back to that whole thing we were talking about earlier, which is that if you can convince the brand, hey, I already know you have this big AI feature that you're releasing or whatever that you want everyone to know about. I bet you probably allocated $250,000 in your marketing budget to spread the word about that. Here's why you should allocate $50K of that to me. And so it's a positioning exercise, going back to what we talked about earlier.
Research keeps coming to mind. Like, what level of research have you seen is like a baseline for pitching brands?
The sweet spot, in my opinion, is about 15 to 20 minutes of research, where you do this kind of sleuthing exercise, where you look at their blog, you look at their press releases, you look at what they're posting on social media. This is one of my favorite strategies that I talk about is going to a brand's Instagram. If it's a consumer brand, pretty much every consumer brand has an Instagram, right? And I don't care if you're on Instagram or not, that's irrelevant, but you can use Instagram as a research tool. So for example, let's say that, it's January and we want to pitch a brand for a new year, new you campaign. Too late. Sorry. They baked that campaign 6 months ago. You have to know what types of campaigns they were running so that when you pitch them, let's say in August, that's when you need to be pitching them for a January kind of new year, new you campaign. So what I talk about is like, hey, go to their Instagram and scroll back and see what campaigns they were running last January, if we're sitting here in July, August. And when you reach out to them, you say, hey, I saw that you were running that hashtag new year, new you, whatever the hashtag is that they were running. Are you going to be running that campaign again this year? And that's the subject line. It's hashtag new year, new you in 2025 ? Or something like that. And so I talk about some of these kind of tried and true subject lines that I've tried over the years, is realizing like that they're going to open that email because that was their campaign. They ran it. It's relevant to them, this type of thing. Right. And so I think so this research thing is going to be even more important in the age of AI because a lot of people are just going to ChatGPT and they're copying and pasting these pitches and they're shotgunning it to hundreds of different brand contacts and they're not hearing back and they're getting demoralized. Just stop it. Just say, okay, here's my short list, 5 to 10 brands. I'm going to research them. I'm going to see that the director of marketing was on a fireside chat at South by Southwest, and I listened to the recording, and they said this thing. I'm going to talk about that in the first sentence of the email, and the brand's going to be like, wow, that's cool. That's interesting. That's different. Let's have a conversation with this person. This is how it works.
It's not ChatGPT. You're very, like I said when I introduced you, like, you're well placed to speak to this because you've been on both sides, like both sitting in the boardroom, if you will, at the table with brands who have $1 million to spend with, as you had said in the previous episode, 100 or so creators, and then you have creators who you represent, and you're hearing the brand say what you want, but you've also heard the creators say what they want, and then you've successfully negotiated deals and helped lots of creators negotiate these deals.
I need to clarify something because it's an important distinction, which is that I never actually represented people at the agency. My customer was the brand. They were my customer. And I had like a short list of people that I would go to that I worked with a lot, the creators. And I would basically come to them and say, hey, I'm not your like exclusive representative or manager, but can I bring you deals from time to time if a brand wants to work with you? And everyone would be like, sure, like you'll get the rate. I'm not going to take a cut from you. Like you know, and so my customer was the brand. And actually this is important because, I can speak very credibly to the needs that the things that the brands were saying that they would never say to the creator. Like oftentimes they would never feel comfortable saying certain things, or like, I'm not going to work with that creator because of XYZ, or I'm not going to hire them because of this. And so a lot of times what our job was is that because of our customers were asking this of us, is they would say, hey, we want you to evaluate these 20 or 30 people to ensure that nothing sordid is going to come up in their past that we regret later. So if we hired them, did they say something on MySpace in 8th grade that, was, really bad and like they're going to get canceled, and by extension, our brand is going to get canceled? Things like that. Yeah, we would have to do these like audits where we would go to people's profiles, we would watch some of their videos, we would scroll back, look for things on their Twitter, and these kind of risk assessment audits were taking place, especially with some of these very traditional brands. The big incumbent, P&G, Unilever, like a lot of these brands are very safe, very traditional. They don't want to be embroiled in controversy. And so like this is a thing that is happening. And I think a lot of people don't realize that this is happening, that brands are very careful these days, like who they partner with. Right. And so I've had a lot of experience of basically just like saying, hey, we have to pass on this creator or this person because this just looks a little questionable. We want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Let's move on to someone else. And so there is things that you can do though to improve your attractiveness, right? This is the sponsor magnetism that I talk about a lot in the book, is like quick optimizations that you can make to your kind of digital resume, which is your social media platform, your website, things like that, that will greatly increase the chances of getting these deals.
That's in the book too?
Dude,
I've got
100%, man. 100%, man. Because it's like something very simple like this. Okay. One of the things that I talk about a lot is in the book is something called your surprising transformative promise, your STP, as I call it. It was one of my frameworks. And this is basically your elevator pitch, your tagline in your bio or on your website. How are you not only going to serve your audience, but how are you going to serve your brand partners? So when someone lands on your profile and they read this like kind of one-liner, like let's go back to my one-liner, right? Which is like, I will help you find and negotiate your dream sponsorships so that is critical. That's the transformation thing. So that you stop leaving thousands on the table, right? And so when someone lands on that and they see that, what I call surprising, like, first of all, what is a sponsorship coach? That's kind of surprising. I have no idea what that is, right? Transformative, right? I'm going to help you transform into something. I'm going to help you accomplish something. And then a promise. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to do something for you. So especially, if you're listening to this and you're a course creator, you have a membership, you have a community, something like that, it's really worthwhile to sit and think like, what is my surprising transformative promise? How if a brand lands on my profile, how are they going to is it going to be instantly obvious to them that like, wow, this person has a bunch of like course creators in their audience. I want to reach these like 10,000 people. And if you just have this like very amorphous, like, I'm a business coach, I teach course creators, and it's like not going to be very clear, right? And so it's like you kind of have to workshop this stuff.
I'm like, what does my bio say? So obviously I need to get this book for myself. And I don't think I said it on this episode, but for everyone who goes down to below to sponsormagnet.com/podcast, right? And gets on the wait list for the book, you have 15, did you say 15 scripts that help them get brand deals?
Yeah, these are 15 scripts that, kind of these if then, like if the brand says this scenario, here's what you should say in response to them. And like, these are very quick things that you can copy and paste. And, obviously you should tweak them to each specific situation. But it's like very common things. So like, for example, if the brand says, hey, we want to give you this free thing, this gift or something in exchange for you talking about it on your podcast or in your community or whatever, how can you pivot that to saying, hey, yes, but you got to pay me? Like, what are the things that you can say? And there's different variations on these, by the way, right? Sometimes they'll say, hey, become an affiliate. Or sometimes they'll say, hey, our product is expensive, so that should be compensation enough. Or, oh, how about you be an ambassador? Or like, there's all these different versions of it. And I give different responses of like, because you should be saying different things. You should not be saying, oh, well, I'm only focusing on paid partnerships right now, so let me know if you have a budget in the future, which is what a lot of people say. It's like, you just slam the door in their face. What are you doing? They're telling you that they're interested in you. Like, make them. Here's a very quick, here's some free game. You ready?
Some free game? All right,
here's some free game. Here's some free game. Okay, the brand says, be an affiliate, right? Like 20% commission, whatever. You say, hey, thank you so much for letting me know about your affiliate program. That looks awesome. I'm going to check it out. Out of curiosity, do your affiliates grant you the rights to repurpose their content for paid advertising? Because that's something that I specialize in. Let me know if you'd like me to send over a few investment options for what that might look like.
Wow. Okay.
That is literally, that's one of the scripts in this 15 scripts bonus thing that we're talking about here. So if that tickled your noggin, massaged your brain a bit, make sure to check it out.
I just put my own name onto the wait list. So like if you look in your email CRM after we finish recording this episode, you will see my name there, and I'm waiting for the scripts. This is great. This is great. Thank you, Justin, for being here and sharing about your book. But really, you've been sharing what we all need to know, and I can say that easily. What everybody listening here needs to know. People think about YouTube channel or podcast. You surprised me when you said that your course got sponsored. You want to run through a quick list of things that people don't think that can get sponsored or how they could monetize their brand?
100%, dude. Here's another story. So I was negotiating with a sponsor, and they told me on this discovery call that we mentioned earlier, they said, typically what we've done is sponsored newsletters, and those are great. But the thing we don't like about newsletters is that once they go out, we feel like it kind of disappears into the ether. It's like, it was great for a couple days, people see it, but then it disappears, right? And so it can be kind of effective from a direct response perspective, but I don't know. That was just like one thing we don't like about newsletters. And so they said this like 3 or 4 times throughout the call, and I was like, okay, interesting. So I wrote it down. And so when I was putting the proposal together for them, and it was going to include a bunch of different things. It was going to include podcasts, YouTube integration, social stuff, newsletter, etc. But I kept thinking about this thing that they said about the ethereal nature of newsletter stuff. And so I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a brand new section of my website called Partners. This had never existed before. And I created this new page in my website builder. I put their logo on it. I put a little bit of copy on this program that they wanted to promote. I password protected the page, and I put a screenshot of it in the proposal, and I sent it to in the email. And I said, hey, I heard what you said about this like kind of ethereal nature of newsletters. Guess what? I have this new area on my website called Partners, where I'm going to, for the duration of our partnership together, I'm going to highlight the fact that we have this collaboration. And they said, where do we sign? And so it goes back to this idea about creativity. It's like, this is something that did not exist in my business. I did not have a page like that, but the brand, it's very low lift for me, but it accomplished something that the brand said was a pain point for them. And so this is the philosophy. This is the central theme of this book, is like being creative and listening to the brand and thinking about how can I help serve them and my audience at the same time. And that may be the thing that gets the deal over the finish line.